is arresting more than 100 anti-government protesters, and some of the arrested protesters are reportedly now missing. Joining us now is Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov and executive director for the America Rising PAC, Cassie Smedile, joining us as well. Cassie, your reaction to what is happening there on the ground in Cuba. We can talk about the direction the U.S. should go with this next. But first, those people are struggling. They're calling for help. They're chanting freedom. They're waving the American flag.
That's right. They are looking to the United States as a beacon of hope. And instead, they're just seeing a tepid response. In fact, the initial response that you mentioned from the State Department, and it was even mentioned in the president's statement yesterday, was that this was about COVID, even though they are chanting about freedom. And as somebody once said, that these countries, Cuba is looking at us to be the America that they think we are. And by our administration not having such a strong response in defense of these freedom fighters, in defense of these democratic supporters, is a really bad showing, not just to our neighbor to the south, but to the rest of the world of what happens when America is not firmly behind you.
Jessica, part of the solution, the mayor of Miami, with whom I spoke yesterday, said is calling this what this is. Let's start there. Listen.
I really can't understand why anyone wouldn't, call this what it is, and why anyone wouldn't condemn a communist ideology that has failed, not just in Cuba, but everywhere in the history of humanity. This is an ideology that promises to create equality, and the only equality that it has delivered is equal misery for all of its citizens in every country that it's been tried. And it's time for the United States to understand that.
Because when the White House put out a statement yesterday, I didn't see the word socialism or communism in it, Jessica. And there are members of Congress, including Bernie Sanders, a self-proclaimed socialist, who is not calling this what this is. In fact, he's saying all people have the right to protest and to live in a democratic society. I call on the Cuban government to respect opposition rights and refrain from violence. He says it's also long past time to end the unilateral U.S. embargo on Cuba, which has only hurt, not helped the Cuban people. He's blaming the U.S.
Well, Mayor Suarez's point is well taken, and we've seen a number of rallies in the past few days and obviously heard from prominent voices on both sides of the aisle, including Democratic Senator Menendez, who's been, at the forefront, really, of the Cuban liberation movement for years now, all saying that this is a problem, and this is a problem with socialism and communist ideology. I didn't have a problem with the fact that President Biden didn't use those words in his statement. He was very clear on the campaign trail, especially when it got down to a conversation about him versus Bernie.
Is that not the root cause of their suffering?
He has said it certainly is one of the root causes of their suffering, but President Biden has been absolutely clear from day one that he is not a socialist, he is not a communist, he has nothing to do with that. He believes in free market capitalism and to ensure that we can have a just society, making sure that people have things like health care, that they have a good quality education. But Bernie Sanders lost the primary in 2016 and he lost it in 2020. And I don't understand the fascination with making him the face of our party when we have rejected him time
he's a sitting
and again
member of Congress who touts socialist policies with his very privileged seat.
But he's not the president.
Okay, so when it comes to a solution, I also asked the Miami mayor about that. Listen.
And the United States has to start intervening and finding a way, whether it's through humanitarian aid, whether it's through military intervention, whatever means necessary to protect not just the sovereignty of the Cuban people, but the sovereignty of the United States in this hemisphere.
So, Cassie, that is now the question. How can the U.S. intervene? To what degree should America respond?
Well, it first starts by having a clear and resolute stance in favor of these democracy fighters and these freedom fighters, and to acknowledge that these people are not taking to the streets because they're not getting a COVID vaccine. They're taking to the streets because of decades of oppression. And if we don't acknowledge that, then where do we even go from there? But to Jessica's point about Bernie Sanders not being the leader of their party, we're just talking today about he's waiting on pins and needles to introduce his $6 trillion budget bill that's going to have all these socialist gifts in it. So that is the direction of the party. That is where he wants to see it go. And I think it's a problem for this White House that they cannot call this what it is, because they know that they have to acquiesce to their far left base, who are really in charge of their party today.
Jessica, I want to get this in because we do have some news out of the State Department on how to proceed with what is happening there in the streets of Cuba. The statement reads this: we're always considering options available to us that would allow us to support people to support their humanitarian needs, which are indeed profound. So we are left wondering, what is the next move to help these people? Jessica.
Well, I hope that it's some form of humanitarian aid package. If we need to get to intervention, I think we're willing to do that. Secretary Blinken had a very strongly worded statement yesterday to that effect. I've heard also that it's possible that we can intervene in terms of reactivating their internet. I know the Cuban government has shut down communication in the country, obviously, to support their cause. We need to make sure that we take every avenue that's available for us to help there. I'd say, learned a lesson in the Middle East that these countries with these dissidents, with these freedom fighters, need our help, and we need to make sure to do that. And I think it would have been great if we had done more for Hong Kong protesters, actually, a couple years ago. And I know there are people on the right who agree with that as well, including someone like Rick Scott, who pushed back against the president when he wasn't supportive of the bill that passed Congress in terms of supporting the Hong Kong protesters, because he didn't want to upset President Xi.
Cassie, to what is happening there, Ted Cruz asking the question, how is this possible? Responding to a Sunday tweet from the Biden State Department telling us that the Cuban communist dictatorship protects their, quote, right to peaceful assembly. That was remarkable.
Yeah, that seemed like more of a nod to the oppressive regime instead of to these freedom fighters. And for those who have been following with Cuba, not even that closely, you know that for years and years, what they put out, the propaganda video that the government puts out versus the reality on the ground, are two very different things. And it should never be a question of where the United States stands, and our efforts should always be for the Cuban people who are fighting for democracy and against any efforts to oppress that effort, including a regime that continues to promote communist and socialist policies.
Great to have both of you here, Jessica and Cassie. Thank you.
Thanks,
John?
Sandra.
All right.